Hi everyone. In this video, this is a continuation video of my past video related to failures and the silver linings from failures. Many a times, people don't realize the silver linings of failures, especially if we are only looking at life from the monetary perspective. And the second thing is something that people normalize as failures or consider as failures may not really be your failure, but just a stepping stone to something you were meant to learn as a result of you failing in something that has been normalized as something that you shouldn't fail. For example, when I made my previous two videos, if you have watched them, and basically for me, the first failure was when I failed to complete my PhD program, and instead, when I failed the PhD qualifiers, I ended up with a master's degree. Now, if I was meant to become a professor in pharmacology or a researcher in pharmacology or wanted to do some high profile pharmacology related research work in some pharmaceutical company, if say my life purpose was meant to be that, then this failure would have been my stepping stone to understanding deeply how to crack these exams, how to become a pharmacology researcher, how to become better at being a pharmacology researcher. These would be the way in which I would start thinking after failing this particular qualifiers. But as I said, at that time I didn't realize. At that time it was a major ego related challenge because I had never failed in school exams. And in school or university exams, it's not that I didn't do poorly. Sometimes I was an above average student in most of my studying days. But despite being an above average student, there were some times in brief periods of my life during my school and college years where I wasn't really that into studies, or I wasn't studying or paying enough attention to my studies, which led me to not get above average grades. But most of the time, when I did focus on my studies, I would end up getting above average grades in India. But US system and Indian system of studies is very different, so that was another reason why I had failed this exam. And I realized that the way in which US exams for PhD programs are structured, it's very different. You have to be very independent oriented thinker in order to succeed in those exams. And at that time, my brains were not processing independent thinking. I didn't have that in me because having lived in India, where all my life until I came to US, I had never lived away from family. I had always lived with my parents. I had never uh, done anything independently. Like if my parents told go for vacation, I would go for vacation. If my parents gave any restrictions, don't do this, I won't do it. I was not at all a rebellious child. I was a very ordinary sane child. I would do everything my parents expected of me. The only two places where I had rebelled before I went to US is that first thing is, parents, like many parents from average middle class families in India, sometimes expected their children, especially the place where I grew up in, there the expectation was that children would end up being engineers or doctors. And the reason why they expected me or my brother to enter these professions were because my mother's side family had many doctors, and my father's side family had a few engineers. My father himself had some interest in medical related subjects, and because of which they expected a little bit that we would end up doing this professionally, and these are also the highest paying jobs in India. So because of this reason also, most parents push their kids to go into these two streams of work. But that doesn't mean that, and this is another thing maybe Indian students need to start reconsidering, that even though it is true that engineering and medical field has so far raised in the world the highest earnings for many people, it's not necessarily the only fields of work that anyone can pursue. Firstly, because money isn't everything. Secondly, not just because money isn't everything, life is not simply about medicine or using computers or technology, right? Life involves us doing many other experiences, and if you are in a different profession that aids that experience, you could be in that profession. And even in the medical field, like how I went to pharmacy school instead, that was a minor rebellion. I didn't completely rebel against not studying something intellectual, even though my soul was actually at that time very very deeply into reading books. From childhood days, because I was a very easy child to manage, all my parents needed were to give me a couple of books or TV, and that's all I needed to entertain myself. That's why I never had a childhood where people were talking with me. My family life was completely filled with silence, majority of my upbringing years. So that's why very used to having peace and quiet in home life, or I prefer that quiet time, silent time where for a few hours no one disturbs me. I've become that kind of a personality because for years and years during my childhood days, the only verbal interactions I would have with people were either when I was in school, and even in school, because no one was communicating with me at home, or the only communication I would have and home life would happen when I would go and visit my cousins during vacation time. That too also happened once in a couple of years, not every year. So once in a couple of years for 3-4 weeks, I would have interactions with a lot of people where I'm chirping and talking around with people. Or in the evening time when I was spending 1 hour with my friends who lived in the same building as me. We lived in Indian society, like a place where our building had like 72 flats or something, and not 72 flats, 72 was the 78, anyways, I think it was 72 flats, but that many families lived in just one building. And India being a highly populated place, there were always children my age in our building, and we would usually hang out in the evenings. So that 1-2 hours in the evenings, I would chatter a lot with my friends, but again, I was not the most outspoken even in that social circle. I was never a very outspoken kid, but it's taken me almost living 13 years in US to become an outspoken person. Otherwise, personality wise, I was a very quiet kid. I wouldn't speak up much. I would only speak up in front of those people who I'm comfortable speaking up in front of. But now I have changed and started making these videos and become more of a public speaking person. Firstly, because of my pharmacist experience, which was the next silver lining, which I was talking about in my some previous videos, that if I hadn't failed my PhD program, I would never have thought of becoming a pharmacist in US. That line of work wouldn't have even at least occurred to me until I had finished my PhD. Like, it did occur to one of my friends who did finish her PhD in pharmacology. It took her 5 or 6 years to finish her pharmacology degree. But after she had done her PhD program, when she was doing her postdoctoral program, when she was facing some funding related, US research funding related challenges in US for her related field of work, and all those moments after nearly like 8-10 years of having lived in US and pursued a career related to her PhD degree, when she was facing financial challenges, she really thought about contemplating and shifting to becoming a pharmacist. At the time, I had suggested to her not to do that because at the time the market was down, and I was studying at the time and doing a PharmD program. And in that PharmD program, I met like 70-80 students in my class, and that, or maybe 50 plus students, 70 might be a little bit. But I met that many students, and they were all talking about how the degree programs, like the pharmacist work also was slowly dwindling. So by the time my friend would have pursued the pharmacist licensing, it would have taken her also a couple of years. And then if she had entered in this new field where the market was shrinking, it might have hindered her career the same way it was hindering all of us who were now trying to upgrade our degrees from being a bachelor's or master's. We were all trying to become a doctoral degree level pharmacist, because when you are a doctoral level pharmacist, you can clinically diagnose patients, you can look at patients' clinical reports, you can consult and collaborate with doctors in a hospital or home health care or assisted living facilities to aid the elderly population's medication usages. Someone could also collaborate with someone in, say, drug addiction related facilities to help in managing the therapy of a patient who is undergoing a drug addiction related challenges, right? Because it's again a medicine related field. So all these shifts were happening in the pharmacy line. My friend also shifted. She eventually pivoted into completely different field, but based on whatever her unique skills were, she also managed to pivot. And yes, she also faced the same problem of not being able to get grants, which pushed her into shift to a different degree program. Like if there was unlimited grant still available or a lot of access to research funding was available for her field, she would have continued otherwise in that field of work. But because there was a limited access, US government shutdowns were happening at that time, and US government was reducing the funds to certain kinds of research, she also had to pivot. And that same thing was also happening in the pharmacy area, where for me and other pharmacists who were upgrading our skills, we had to do it because many pharmacies were shutting down at that time in US, because there was that economic downturn in 2008, and after that all these changes slowly started happening in US life. So in 2012 I had to make another call where while I was doing this PharmD degree, which was a 2-year program, and I would have finished it in 2013, but my work visa was expiring in 2012. And because my work visa was expiring in 2012, I asked my university where I was doing the PharmD whether they can sponsor a student visa for a few months. But they couldn't do that sponsorship for a few months because they had no rules for online education. This was an online education program where we did have to go to the university once, 3 times in a year, but majority of the other coursework was done online and submitted online. And so that's why it was a challenge, and I had to make a call, and I knew I might fall into this challenging phase. So I had already planned before I asked this university, or maybe that what would I do if the university says they can't sponsor my visa. So I had started thinking on that, and I decided maybe I should again pivot and study a new program. And that's how I ended up studying the MBA MHA program at the University of Utah, because again I didn't know whether after doing this degree whether I would stay in US, leave US. I always wanted to be married. So in the background, in my early 30s, I was in my early 30s at that time. And typically most Indian girls, even if you are not even Indian born, if you're American born but from Indian culture, say, even those people are expected usually by their family to get married in their mid-20s or at least by their late 20s. And in general, even Americans I have seen, it's considered a typical thing that if women get married before their 30s or at least by their early 30s, they are considered more marriageable than if you have hit your mid-30s. By then, a little bit of a marriage market related struggle can happen to women. So because of this reason also, I was in the background thinking I want to get married. So after marriage, or while I do this other degree program, I might have to think about also looking online through, online websites for marriages, like Indian websites like shadi.com, online websites like eHarmony or match.com. These were the places, or Bharat Matrimony. These were the places where I was in the background sometimes searching and seeing if I can find someone to meet with, chat with, and figure out whether we are a potential marriage match. And so I